Hello ladies and gentlemen, today we're back in War Thunder looking at another new French plane. This is the M.B.162. It is a rank 3 battle rating 4.0 frontline bomber, and it is the only bomber you're going to get for France in rank 3 unfortunately, and the only one you get in rank 4 is the privateer. So it's basically the last propeller driven bomber that you're going to get, which is anywhere near French. So the M.B.162 is a 4-engined, not huge bomber. I mean, it's decent size for a 4-engine, but it's definitely not as big as some of the other monstrosities we have in game. If you look at the armor on it, unfortunately it's the same as most of the other French aircraft in the game, no armor to speak of. And then, if you look at the X-ray, we have 4 engines. They are the Gnome Rhone 14N48. This is another 1943 aircraft, very similar to the MB157, so therefore it has very similar engines. It has a gunner in the front, who isn't a gunner, he's a bombardier / navigator, 2 pilots, and then you do actually have the gunners in the back. You have 2 in waist gunner positions, 1 in the top of the fuselage and 1 in the bottom. These 2 at the top and bottom, they have access to 1 Hispano 404 each. You can probably see the really long barrel here, and also the long barrel at the bottom here. The 2 gunners that you see in the center have 2 7.5mm machine guns, which aren't great, but you know, they are there. The wings themselves are made of fuel tanks, and that's really about it when it comes to this aircraft. It's very simple design. It's another one of these prototype aircrafts which was made in the middle of the war by the French and never obviously really saw service, but an interesting concept and nice to see it in game. If we want to talk about the upgrades and what you should try and strive for, one of the issues with this machine is that its normal bomb load isn't great, but it is good enough. So you start off with 6 200 kilos and 6 100 kilos. So that basically leaves you with 1800 kilos of bombs, which is good enough to nearly take out 2 bases, but it can take out at least a base, meaning that you are able to research stuff without having to kill enemies. The upgrade you should prioritize is this one here, the 500 GPS, and you're able to get 4 500 kilogram bombs. Now this means that you have the opportunity to kill 2 bases or 4 pillboxes quite easily. If we're talking about which upgrades to get per tier, radiator fuselage to prioritize in rank 1. In rank 2, the airframe compressor. You don't really have to worry about the 7.5mm just because of where they're situated. Then you get the 500 GPS, engine, wings repair, and then turret, and then move on to the last ones. This aircraft stock is quite a quick aircraft, so therefore, even though going after the performance upgrades, you may think, oh, well, I'm doing that for the speed and stuff. No, you're generally doing it for the sustainability of the aircraft after it is hit. But anyway, that's the general stuff, looking at it from afar. Let's get into some gameplay. So here we are in the MB162, as you can see, pretty much spawning at the 3500, the general spawn that you will get into a bomber. And because you can take the 4 500 kilograms, you do have a little bit of flexibility with this bomber. A lot of bombers, I would say to you, just go for the bases, go for the airfield. They are easy targets to do, especially if you're around 3,500 to 4,000 meters off the ground. But with these 500 kilos, because they had 300 kilograms of explosive mass in them, even landing it near a light pillbox can destroy it. Now obviously going after tanks at this altitude is definitely not the easiest thing to do, but if you are capable or if you are confident in yourself, you should definitely do that as well. If you kill 4 pillboxes, you will get much more silver lines and research than if you killed 2 bases, which is something else you can do with the 4 500s. It takes 2 500 kilogram bombs to kill a base, therefore you're able to kill 2 of them, which is at least, you know, kinda nice. It means that if you have 4 of these MB162s in a squad, you can, if you want to, take out all 3 bases with 2 of them, leaving one with 500 kilos, and then you have 2 other bombers which have 2,000 kilos each, meaning that you can put a massive dent in the airfield, which overall would mean that you would only have to go back to your airfield once, rearm, and then go and bomb it. So this is a decent squad aircraft, if you want to see it like that. Not as good as the likes of the Farman or the NC-223, but still pretty good in its effect. Now, the biggest difference between the Farman, the NC, and the M.B.162 here is the fact that when you get to this level, this BR around 4.0, you start running into different aircraft. The reason the Farman, the NC, get away with what they do is because they have really no competition at the altitude around 4,000. Either nobody climbs there, or no aircraft performs very well there. With the MB, the difference is you have people climb to you, and they do damage. At the same time around this BR, there is a really annoying plane, let's say, which you will find in pretty much every match, at least 1 or 2 of them at this level, and it is the P-47. Whether you are facing Americans, Germans, or Russians, there will be a few P-47s. And the great thing about the premium German and Russian P-47 is that they sit at a battle rating of 3.7, which is actually lower than the American one. Now, some can argue that the reason for that is because it doesn't have some of the upgrades that the American one has, but the overall playstyle is pretty much exactly the same if you compare them, and they also get an air spawn. So whereas a lot of aircraft may only be able to hit you on the way back from when you've hit the bases, which you'll see in this match, the P-47 can actually hit you before you have got your bombs off. Now, this is where some of the engine upgrades and stuff like that come in. If you're able to get most or the majority of the modifications, what will happen is that you will be able to get to the bases before stuff like the P-47s, the G55Ss, and BF-109s are able to get to you. But if you're a bit more stock and you don't have that much stuff, maybe a compressor or a fuselage repair, you're going to just have to understand that a lot of aircraft are going to be able to come after you. So this is pretty much a game which I wanted to show because it's very similar to how every other game pretty much goes in this thing. You get your bombs off, either hit the bases or the light pillboxes if you want to be safer, but risk your bombs not hitting, you go for the light pillboxes. If you want to make sure your bombs hit, but it's a bit more risky, you hit the bases. So in this, I hit the bases, and then I go into a shallow dive with WEP on, because these engines, they take quite a long time to overheat, just like every other French engine, and I need to get away from these fighters who are climbing. Because of this map, a lot of the time you will actually end up or basically running perpendicular to the enemy who are climbing at the same time, and you saw a bit of action there with the Hispanos. Now, the Hispanos at 4.0 are still very good guns. They feel a little bit more hit and miss though compared to some of the earlier levels. They will take off people's wings with one shot, they will pilot knock with one shot, they can set fires with one shot, and because you have 2 of them, there's always more of a possibility of that happening. What is an issue though is the accuracy. The accuracy of these cannons, I should say, are not very good at all. You'll see in the video coming up when I'm shooting at this G55S that the tracers are just all over the place, and that follows a very similar pattern to the rest of the time that I've been shooting these things. This means that the G55S is able to take lumps out of me. Now, the survivability of this MB is massively enhanced once you get some of the upgrades, so cover is a very specific one. What was happening with my MB before I was able to get some of the rank 3 and rank 4 upgrades is my tail would literally just shear off in the middle of the fuselage, leaving me in a situation where I wasn't able to get back home. But as you can see with that G55S, yes, it has done some damage to my elevator, it has done some damage to my fuel tanks, and a little bit to my engines, but overall, I have been able to soak up the damage. So, if we're talking about survivability, it's pretty good in this machine, as long as you have the upgrades. It is going to be a bit of a slog through the rank 1, rank 2, rank 3 upgrades until you get those 500 kilos in order to be able to bomb bases, in order to do all that stuff. But you're going to have to get through it, because, well, you're going to have to research this vehicle if you want to move on to the next stage anyway, because you're going to have to get yourself the privateer in order to lock jets. So, you know, you better get used to it as you go along. But yeah, the Hispanos are great in the back, and the fact that there are two of them is even better. I just wish that there was a little bit more accurate, even with the modification unlocked. It would just make them a little bit better. There's also a very small blind spot on the tail of this aircraft, which a lot of aircraft will end up right in the center, where you'll find both of your Hispanos are not able to hit it. Basically, it's where the tail meets right at the end. Both of your cannons are unable to do anything. The 7.5 millimeters in the middle of the fuselage, I generally don't see them doing that well, mainly because the majority of targets you're firing at do have armor on them, or some form of armor, so therefore the 7.5s are kind of negated. When it comes to forward firing guns, of course the MB doesn't have any. So if I was going to give you a way to approach this vehicle, it's going to have to be from the front. Now this is actually kind of hard to do. The MB sits around 400 kilometers an hour pretty easily if you're going in a straight line, even at higher altitudes. The MB does perform better at low altitudes, but if you want that survivability, it's always a good idea to stay at those high altitudes unless there's really heavy cloud cover. But yeah, if I'm talking about optimum position, approach it from the front, because it has no forward firing guns, and the Hispanos on the top and bottom are not able to swivel. They have a very small area where they can shoot behind you, and so hit it from the front, take out the pilots, Bob's your uncle. The engines can actually soak quite a lot of damage, and on a lot of these new French aircraft I haven't actually seen a lot of fires. They seem to be something which just isn't really happening that much. So that is not something you can rely on. It's much better to go for center, at least since a lot of people don't have great crews yet in French, and then maybe once people start getting the better crews, then you start attacking the engines and the wingtips, just like how you would take out a B-17. Now, since I've landed and nearly stopped, generally you have a question to ask yourself, and it's not a very comfortable one, and it's pretty much, do I want to take off again? So in my estimation, in this match, we are going to lose this. The MB is not an aircraft which you can carry with, the tickets are not close enough to us winning the match, and the team has pretty much been wiped. So a lot of the time at this moment in time, once I've repaired and rearmed, I will just J out and leave the game. But because I was recording this, I was like, you know what, might as well just keep going. But just take that in mind. If you J out in this situation, your repair will be a lot less, and you're going to lose the match anyway, so what's the point in wasting time? If you do J out within the allotted time, your crew will be locked, but generally if you get back to the airfield and repair, you've already gone past that allotted time. It doesn't count as a crash, so if you land and you haven't taken damage, and you repair and then you go to the end of the runway and J out, you can actually save a free repair for yourself. So in situations like this, where I've tabbed, I've had a look at my team, had a look at the enemy team, realized it's about 2 on 6 and we're both bombers, I will just leave the match. And I think that's a completely fine thing to do, because there have been so many situations where you just waste 10-20 minutes of your enemy's time and your time trying to maybe get a bombing point, whereas if you get into the next match, maybe you can do a little bit more. So I talked about the Hispanos and how they have quite limited coverage, and that is definitely true, but a lot of people will still attack you from the back, giving you the opportunity to kill them. My KD in this thing is actually not too bad. It's about 0.8, which for a bomber is only really eclipsed by the B-17 and the B-29 for me. and that is because of those Hispanos having that one-shot capability. But at the end of this match, what happens? Well, I get dove on by about 3 or 4 German and Italian fighters, and I die, which is an unfortunate thing, as you can see right here, and they knock out my Hispano straight away, unfortunately. But yeah, that's really about it with this aircraft. It is fun to fly, it is something you're gonna have to research and play. Just watch out for those damn P-47s. I'll catch you next time.